guys, Jeramiah with QandA Gaming here, and today I want to go over a game that's been getting a lot of hype, Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars Rebellion is an asymmetrical area control game based upon the theme of the original Star Wars trilogy. In it, one player takes on the role of the Empire, trying to locate and destroy the hidden Rebel base, while the other player takes on the role of the Rebels, and they're trying to last long enough to be a thorn in the Empire's side and raise the galaxy up against them. The game is for 2 players with a team variant for 3 or 4, and is very evocative of the theme of the original trilogy. But before I get too far into it, let's go and see how it's set up, how it's played, and I'll come back to you with my thoughts. Start out by taking the 2 halves of the game board, opening them up, and aligning them like this. At this point, the player playing the Imperial faction should be on the side of the table with Coruscant. The Rebel player will take the opposite side of the table. Start by finding the Objectives deck, which is divided into 1s, 2s, and 3s. To ready this deck, start by shuffling up the 3s, followed by the 2s, place the 2s on top of the 3s, and last, shuffle the 1s and place them on top of the stack to form an ordered deck. Then, take this deck and place in the top left-hand section of the game board, here, where it says Objectives. Next, find the Time token and the Influence token and place them in their corresponding spots on the time track on the left-hand side of the game board. Place the Time token on the very first slot of the time track, here. Then place the Influence token on the 14th slot, where it's indicated, here. The next phase of setup will differ depending on whether or not this is one of your first games of Star Wars Rebellion. If it's one of your first games and you're not yet comfortable, go ahead and refer to page 16 of your rulebook for recommended starting setup. This will tell you where to place units and influence to give you a balanced game for newer players. Once you get more comfortable, you can use the standard setup, which we'll go ahead and do. To use the standard setup, first give each player the appropriate number of units. The Imperial player will get 12 Stormtroopers, 5 AT-STs, 1 AT-AT, 12 TIE Fighters, 3 Transports, 3 Star Destroyers, and 1 Death Star. The Rebel player will then receive 6 Rebel Troopers, 2 Land Speeders, 2 X-Wings, 2 Y-Wings, 1 Rebel Transport, and 1 Corellian Corvette. Once players have their starting units, go ahead and find the Probe deck. The Probe deck has a card in it for each system on the game board, and reveal cards from the top of the deck until 3 Rebel systems are revealed. Rebel systems can be identified by the Rebel icon in the bottom left-hand corner of the card. There's no icon here, so this is a neutral system. Keep revealing cards until you find 3 Rebel icon systems. So here's our first one, and we can see this is Bothwai. So we would go ahead and take a Rebel influence marker and place it in Bothwai here. Once 3 Rebel systems have been revealed, go ahead and reveal 2 Imperial systems. Imperial systems will have their logo on the bottom left, and the first 2 Imperial systems revealed will get a subjugation marker. Then reveal another 3 Imperial systems. These 3 systems will receive a Imperial influence marker. Once all the influence markers have been placed, again, 3 Rebel, 2 Subjugation, and 3 Imperial, go ahead and take any Imperial cards revealed and return them to the game box. Take all the other cards revealed and shuffle them back into the deck. Then, first have the Imperial player place their units on the systems that they control. Each system they control must have at least 1 Imperial ground unit in it. The ground units are the Walkers and the Stormtroopers. Once they're done, the Rebel player can then place their units. They can place their units either in the Rebel base on the left-hand side of the game board, here, or in one other neutral system or a system controlled by the Rebels. Again, only 2 systems for the Rebels, the hidden Rebel base, and 1 other system. Then, find the 2 tactics decks, shuffle them up, and place them somewhere near the game board. These will be used during combat. Now that the board's set up, let's go ahead and set up each player. Start by giving each player their appropriate faction card. These cards are double-sided, with the back being used for the team variant. For now, go ahead and set it to the appropriate side with a large leader pool on the right. Then, give each player their 4 starting leaders. Starting leaders can be identified because they will lack the recruitment icon to the right of their portrait, shown here. Rebel leaders can be identified as they have the rounded tops and they have the rebel icon at the bottom of their portrait. Whereas Imperial leaders have rigid tops and the Imperial logo at the bottom of their portrait. The 4 starting leaders for the rebels will be General Riken, Mon Mothma, Princess Leia, and Jan Dodonna. For the Imperials, they'll have General Tag, Grand Moff Tarkin, Darth Vader, and Emperor Palpatine. Next, have each player find their appropriate action deck. From their action deck, they should locate their starting action cards. The Imperials will have 4 starting action cards, whereas the Rebels will have 6 starting action cards. Starting action cards can be identified as, again, they will not have the recruitment logo shown in the bottom left-hand corner of the card. From their starting cards, they should take them, shuffle them up, and draw 2 randomly. The remaining cards that are not used should be returned to the game box. Then, the rest of the action cards should be shuffled and placed next to your player sheet where shown. Now have each player take their mission deck and locate their 4 starting mission cards. Starting mission cards can be identified by the boomerang symbol shown in the bottom center of the card, shown here. After the Rebel player has their starting mission cards, they can go ahead and set their deck off to the side. They don't have to worry about it. The Imperial player, however, after they have their starting cards, needs to separate their mission deck into 2 piles. One pile containing all the cards that have a star in the bottom right-hand corner. Once the stars have been removed from the deck, take the remaining cards and place it where indicated next to your faction card. Then, take the cards that you separated with the star and place them in the bottom left-hand corner of the game board where it's labeled Projects. Here. Now, have the Rebel player take the top card of the objective deck and add it to their hand. Once that's done, the Rebel player should take the remaining probe cards that were not returned to the deck and search through them to determine where they want to hide the Rebel base. Once that's been done, they should take that card in secret and place it underneath the game board on the left-hand side where the Rebel base is located. Shown here. Once that's done, take the remaining probe cards and place them in the bottom left-hand corner of the game board where indicated. Here. To complete setup, have each player draw 2 mission cards in addition to their starting hand, then take all the tokens and dice and set them somewhere out where everyone can reach them, and you're ready to play. The objective of Star Wars Rebellion varies depending on which faction you are playing. If you are the Empire, you are attempting to locate and ultimately destroy the hidden Rebel base. You accomplish this by either having influence or ground troops in that system, at which point the Rebel player would be forced to reveal themselves and combat would occur. If you are the Rebel player, your objective is simply to outlast the Empire's attempts. If at any point the time marker reaches the same point on the time track as the influence marker, the game is over and the Rebels have won. The Rebels can move the influence marker farther back down the time track by successfully completing mission cards. Each turn in Star Wars Rebellion is divided into 3 phases: the assignment phase, the command phase, and the refresh phase. During the assignment phase, players can look at the mission cards in their hand and they can assign leaders from their leader pool to these cards. To assign a leader to a mission, that leader must first meet the prerequisites for that mission. So we can see here the established trade relations mission requires 3 of the orange skill points. So we can see that Mon Mothma here has the required skills to attempt this mission. Up to 2 leaders can team up to complete a mission. So while Princess Leia does not meet the required skill set, we see she only has 2 orange skills, she can be paired up with General Riken, and together they can attempt the mission. Once you've decided what leaders you want to attempt the mission, take that card from your hand and place it face down in front of you with the assigned leaders on top of the card. Any leaders not assigned to mission during this phase will be available for the next phase to counter opponents' missions or to move units on the game board. Once the Rebel player has assigned all of their leaders to missions that they wish, then the Imperial player can assign all of their missions and we move on to the next phase. The next phase of the game is the command phase. The command phase will start with the Rebel player and they will take one of 3 available actions. After they take an action, then the Imperial player will go and play will continue back and forth until both players have passed. The first action available is that you can activate one of your face-down mission cards from the previous phase. To activate a mission, simply flip it face up and do what is written on the card. It will say one of 2 things. Either resolve, like this card here, resolve in any system that does not contain an Imperial unit, Oftentimes, missions will tell you to execute them in a particular system. When you're instructed to do so, take the leader or leaders that were assigned to that mission and place them in the required system. So we'll take General Riken here and just throw him on mouse there. If the card says resolve, just do what else is written on the card and you're good to go. However, if instead the card says attempt, as this card here says, we saw earlier, attempt in any system not containing a sabotage marker, then the opposing player would have the option to attempt to stop this mission. So we'll send Mon Mothma in somewhere, and the Imperial player can then take one of his leaders, not assigned to a mission already, and attempt to counter by sending them into that same system. So let's say they both go to Corellia here, and the Empire sends in Darth Vader. Okay. Once a mission is opposed, both players count up the skill set of their leaders, so that there could be more than one, but if you're trying to oppose, you can only send one leader in. They count up the skill set of those leaders that match the prerequisites of the mission. So this mission requires the orange skill. Mon Mothma has 3, so the rebel player would take 3 dice. Color doesn't matter. And the Imperial player would take 2 dice. Players then roll their dice with targeting reticules and explosions counting as a single, blanks counting as a 0, and dueling lightsabers counting as a double. They roll their dice and add up the totals. Only if the attempting player has a higher value, not a tie, is the mission successful. So Mon Mothma would be required to get a higher number than Darth Vader. However, some cards, some missions, will show a picture of a particular leader in the top left-hand section of the card. So we see this right here. Mon Mothma is particularly suited to this mission. If that is the case, and that leader is on that mission, you get a +2 to whatever your roll is. So even though Mon Mothma only rolled a 1 here, she actually has a 3, because she gets a +2 because of the card. Darth Vader got a 2. The mission is successful. After a mission card has been revealed, it is then removed from the game. Unless it is one of the 4 starting mission cards that has the boomerang symbol at the bottom of the card, and then it is instead returned back to your hand. These missions are missions that your faction is particularly suited for that you can repeat over and over again. So let's look at what some of these cards are. First, the rebels have the sabotage action that they can attempt in any system that will then place a sabotage marker in that system, reducing the unit production of that system. They also have the ability to build alliances, which will spread their influence around the galaxy. They have rapid mobilization, which will allow them to either pull units from the hidden rebel base or actually move the rebel base, so this is a very powerful card. And lastly, they can gather intel. When they gather intel, they can look at the top 2 cards of the objective deck, which we shuffled earlier, and rearrange them as they see fit. As for the Empire, they can rule by fear, which will allow them to spread their influence. They can gather intel, which will let them draw the top 4 cards of the probe deck and see, where the rebel base is not located, so gather some information there. They can do research and development, which will allow them to either repair the sabotage markers or draw the top card of the project deck. And the project deck are mission cards that are particularly powerful and allow the Imperial player to build things like Death Stars or Super Star Destroyers, so a very cool deck. And their last card is they can attempt to capture a rebel operative. You can actually capture the enemy leaders and then torture them or freeze them in carbonite or turn them to the dark side. Lots of cool things there. The second action available to a player during the command phase is that they can take a leader from their leader pool who is not currently on a mission or opposing a mission and use that leader to activate a system. When a system is activated, units from adjacent systems can be moved into the system where you placed your leader. So let's say the Imperial player takes Darth Vader here. Darth Vader is not on a mission, nor is he opposing a mission anywhere on the game board, and they place them here in this system. When they do so, they can then take units from adjacent systems and move to that location. When moving units, spacefaring units can move without issue. However, any units on your game board that show this icon require transport to move between systems. Units that can carry other units will show their capacity in the bottom left-hand corner of their portrait, shown here. So our assault carrier can carry 4, and our Star Destroyer can carry 6. So when we move our Star Destroyer, it can carry 6 other units. We've got 5 here, so we can move our whole team without issue. It's for this reason that I recommend keeping your spacefaring units in the space area of the game board and your ground troops on the ground. I could also pull units from this system here if I wished. In addition, when you're moving your units, the Rebel player will have shield generators and ion cannons. These are ground fixtures and cannot be moved. One last rule when moving units, some leaders will not have tactics values shown on the bottom of their character portrait. For example, he has no tactics values, and they cannot be used to move other units. They're required to have tactics values, such as the ones on Darth Vader. When activating a system, you cannot pull troops from a system that already contains a leader. For example, if I were to take Emperor Palpatine here and place him in my adjacent system, I could not then pull units from this system. They're currently helping Darth Vader with whatever it is he's doing. In addition, when units are moved from one system to another, different things can occur. First of all, if there are opposing units on the same battleground, meaning I have ground troops where my opponent has ground troops, or space troops where he has space troops, a combat would occur. And we'll go into that here in a moment. Also, if I'm the Imperial player and I have unopposed ground troops in a system, then I can place a subjugation marker on that system, as I've now subjugated it. Even if it is a rebel-controlled system and I have unopposed ground troops, it is still subjugated. It just goes right on top of their marker. If at any point my ground troops were to leave, then the marker would be removed. In addition, because I now have ground troops in this area, the Rebel player is required to tell me if this is the location of his hidden Rebel base. And if it is, he will be required to reveal it. And we'll go over how to do that here in a moment as well. After moving units into a system, if there are opposing units on the same front, meaning either on the ground or in space, then a combat would occur. If the defending player does not have a leader in that system with a tactics value, they could then take a leader from their leader pool who is not performing a mission with tactics values and send them to that system. So we can send Princess Leia because she does have tactics values on the bottom of her portrait. Each player would then draw the appropriate number of tactics cards written on the bottom of their character portrait, the left number being space tactics cards and the right number being ground tactics cards from the appropriate deck. Blue space tactics, orange ground tactics. Once that's done, first a round of space combat would be resolved, and then a round of ground combat would be resolved. Then players have the option to retreat, and then you repeat ad nauseum until either one side is destroyed or one side retreats. During combat, the player who moved into that system is said to be the attacker, and they will get to roll dice first on the attack. To figure out how many dice you get to roll, first count out the number of units you have on that front. Remember, we do space combat first, and we have two TIE fighters and one Star Destroyer. Then, reference your faction sheet. The numbers in the first two columns next to the units show how many dice that unit will roll on the attack. So our TIE fighter gets one black die. The number in the third column shows how many dice of the associated type need to be assigned to that unit to destroy it. So one black hit takes out a TIE fighter. So we'll get 2 black dice for 2 TIE fighters, plus a third black die for our Star Destroyer, and 2 red dice. On these dice, a blank is considered a miss, a targeting reticule is a hit of the color of the die, so this will be a black hit. The direct hit is a wild hit, counting as either red or black, and the dueling lightsabers interact with your tactics cards. This can be either discarded to draw a tactics card, or certain tactics cards will require you discard this symbol to play it from your hand. And they'll be indicated by that symbol right here. Once the attacker has rolled the dice and assigned the dice to the opposing units however they see fit, the defending player can then play tactics cards in their hand to block damage, like this one right here. Once that's done, any units which have received enough damage to be destroyed are removed from the battlefield, and any units which have received damage but not been destroyed, that can be signified through damage tokens, like so. Once the attacker's done, the defender can then make their attack, then you move on to do 1 round of ground combat, and then, again starting with the active player, players have the option to retreat. When retreating, you must prioritize retreating to an area that has either your influence or your units. If you cannot do so, you can then retreat to an area that is neutral. If the Imperial player has the Death Star in combat, they cannot retreat, because they gotta protect this bad boy. The defending player cannot retreat into an area that the attacker came from. So since Darth Vader came from Celeste and Corellia, Princess Leia could not retreat to either of those 2 areas. After that, players continue to go in combat until someone either destroys the opposing player or someone retreats. One last note about combat. You'll notice that on the faction card for the Imperials, the Death Star has no health value. That's because the only way to destroy a Death Star is with a trench run. How do you do a trench run? Well, if the Rebel player has the Death Star Plans objective card, they can then reveal this card from their hand and do what's written on the card. This is a good time to bring up what objective cards actually do. These are secret objectives for the Rebel player, and when they meet the prerequisites for that objective card, they can reveal it from their hand, and then take note of the number here in the top left-hand corner. They move the reputation marker that many spaces on the time track. So if we successfully blew up the Death Star here, we would get to move the reputation marker 2 spaces, putting us 2 turns closer to victory. The final action you can take during the command phase is that you can pass. When you pass, the opposing player can then take as many actions as they wish in succession, until they also pass. However, if you have any leaders left in your leader pool, you can still use these leaders to oppose missions that the opposing player may attempt. This is a good strategy if you don't want to move units anywhere, but you want to leave a couple of guys in reserve to oppose the missions of the other player. Once both players have passed, the command phase is over. The final phase of the turn is the refresh phase. During the refresh phase, players will pull back their leaders that are out on missions and place them back in their leader pool on their game board. Then, players will draw the top 2 cards of their mission deck and add them to their hand. If they have more than 10 mission cards in their hand, they should discard down to 10. Then, if you're the Imperial player, you'll draw the top 2 cards of the probe deck and look at them in secret. These will reveal where the Rebel base is not hidden, because remember, the probe card showing the Rebel base is underneath the game board. If you are the Rebel player, you'll also draw the top card of the objective deck, and we saw how those were used earlier. Next, you'll move the time tracker 1 space forward on the time track. If at this point you move on to a space that has one of these 2 symbols, you'll activate those effects. The first symbol is the recruit symbol. When you reveal the recruit symbol, each player will draw the top 2 cards of their action deck. Players will look at the bottom of these cards at potential leaders they can now add to their leader pool. They can choose 1 leader from the bottom of one of these cards. So let's say we choose this card right here because it has Han Solo, so duh. That player would now find Han Solo from the potential pool of other leaders and add them to their leader pool. They would then keep this card and add it to their other action cards. The other card would be removed from the game. If the time tracker covered up a space with the build icon, all systems can now produce units. When producing units, players should look at each system in which they have influence. They should then reference the symbols written to the left of the influence marker with those on their faction card. So we have 2 orange triangles here. We can see from our faction card that orange triangles reference the Rebel troopers. We then take that number of units, so 2 Rebel troopers, and place them on the right-hand side of the board on the space indicated here, space 1. So here on the right-hand side of the game board, on the Rebels side, we'll take our 2 troopers and place them in section 1. If an Imperial player does not actually have influence in the system, and instead has merely subjugated it, like so, they would only get to use the farthest left symbol, so they would only get 1 orange triangle as opposed to 2 in this case. If a system in which you have influence has opposing units or a sabotage marker on it, it produces no units for you during this phase. The final part of the refresh phase allows you to deploy units. To deploy units, you start with the Rebel player, and each player moves everything down their build queue by 1. So we would move everything in the 1 off the board, everything in the 2 down to 1, everything in the 3 down to 2. Any units that have fallen off the board can now be deployed. Starting with the Rebel player, take any units that have slid off the board and deploy them to systems that you have influence. You can only place a maximum of 2 units to each system. The Rebel player can place units in the hidden Rebel base space on the far left-hand side of the board. After the Rebel player has deployed all of his units, then the Imperial player can deploy theirs. You cannot deploy units to a system in which there are opposing units, so for example here in Kashyyyk, or systems that are sabotaged. The last rule we'll go over, besides the climactic Rebel base reveal, is how to use these action cards. Action cards are pretty simple, and that you just do exactly what's written on the card. The cards tell you when they can be played, written at the top of them here. So for example, target the Star Destroyers will be used at the start of combat. If the card requires you to use a particular leader, and it has a picture of a leader in the bottom left-hand corner, that leader is required to be used when playing the card. Cards could say start of combat, meaning you hold on the card and play it when you have a combat. They could say assignment, meaning you would use this card during the assignment phase. Or they'll say immediate, meaning as soon as you draw this card, or take it into your hand, reveal it and execute its effect. The final rule we'll go over is the reveal of the Rebel base. If the Imperial player would have influence or ground troops in a system where the Rebel base is located, the the rebel player is forced to reveal that, yes, you have found the rebel base. So let's say I had these guys all here, and this is where the rebel base is located. As soon as I had done that, the rebel player is required to go, yep, you found me, reveal the face-down card, which this isn't the correct one, but you understand, and take all units on the rebel base space and move them to the system where they actually were. And then a combat would occur. The rebel player can no longer deploy units to the rebel base space, but they still gain the benefits written up here at the top left-hand section of the board. And that is how you play Star Wars Rebellion. The game continues until either the Imperial player finds and destroys the rebel base, or the time runs out and the rebels win. This is a game that my buddies and I have really enjoyed playing so far, and even if you guys are the rebel players out there and you feel like you're a little far behind, don't worry, you guys have a lot of tricks up your sleeve. If I got anything wrong, feel free to leave me a section in the comments section below. Thumbs up and subscribe really help. And check out our website at QandAGaming.com, where you can vote for the next game I'll do a how-to video for. And as always, thank you for watching.